Hi all, I have an absolutely fascinating game here courtesy of David Grosvenor to show you this morning, UK time. So Leela ID 468, a bit of historical ID against Komodo 9.02. The time control is very fast, 40 moves in per minute. D4 from Leela Chess 468, we have the Dutch defense, and we go into the Leningrad Dutch variation, a very exciting opening, which I've used myself with black, sometimes with some interesting and fun games. C6, we have D5. White gets a certain space advantage now. Then they're playing B4, depriving that knight of the C5 square. And it seems logical to put a bind on the position like this, supporting that D5 central square. C takes, knight takes D5. Knight takes, C takes. So white's pawn seems to eye two key squares in black's camp, so especially the E6 square. And now bishop B2, very logical play to try and exchange off that defensive bishop. The queen takes this interesting diagonal. Knight C7, queen B3, actually the queen now goes back to support D5. Knight E8, and now the nice knight D4, very comfortable looking central knight in this position. We see queen B6, E3 just supported there. Knight E6 doesn't do much. Black could just take and play knight F6. It's pretty even here. So E3 just supporting that knight for the moment. Queen C7. Now, the first very, very interesting move played by Leela in this position. Can you guess white to play? What would you play in this position if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video? Okay, knight C6. So the point here is, if takes, then this is check. And actually, a good move here is this, believe it or not, rook bc1. That's probably one of the better moves. And then taking on d7. This position is just very, very good for white. That's winning for white. So, very interesting move, knight c6. Black played king f7, just holding that e7 pawn against the knight. And now knight takes a7, rook a8, and now we see b5. So if rook takes a7, this isn't played, then b6 forks and wins material. So b5. So we've got an interesting knight on a7 here. Queen b6. And now the knight just goes back to c6. So here, black takes that and plays bishop e6. So what has Leela gained here? All these pawns look visually potentially quite crushing. That's what she's gained. Connected, past, dangerous pawns. Bishop d5 is played, knight c7. Bishop takes, knight takes. a4. The pawns need to be unblockaded. That's a very interesting unpinning move. The king coming to f6 here. Queen c3, putting the king back in its box, rook b4, knight c5. Some pressure on a4 here. Check. h4. h5. Check. Rook f6. Going into a self pin there. Rook a1. e5 is played. This is an interesting position with the pressure of the queenside pawns. If king h7, then a5, for example, this position, crashing through with b6, these pawns will be too dangerous here in this variation. For example, like this, will end up giving white a big advantage with the two connected passed pawns, as an example. So we have e5, queen c4, rook a5. Black is blockading like crazy here. Can these blockades be lifted? Rook e6, rook d1, king f6. Rook d5, rook a8, rook d1, queen c7. Rook a1, rook a5. Queen d5, queen b6. Rook c1, king e7. Rook bc4, rook a7. So guess what Leela's been building up for here? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here? Think about what is visually crushing and then maybe calculate later is the way to find a lot of Leela's moves. So rook takes c5. It looks visually crushing to have 3 connected pass pawns, but we've got to make sure we're not just tactically blown away and lose all the pawns, for example. That could be a slight snag. Here, rook takes c5. So why can't black take on a4, you ask? Well, black played rook c7. If rook takes a4, then we just crash through with c7. Rook a8, we can just take that, and here, queening, with a big advantage, of course. So, rook c7, trying to keep things locked down. Queen c4, rook c8, queen b4, trying to play for a5. King f6, a5, queen b8, queen c3, putting pressure on e5 now as well as the connected pass pawns. Rook c7, king h2, getting out of any potential trouble on this diagonal. But actually, this move puts the king back, so you might think that's a bit weird. And a more radical approach is played here to this whole diagonal. In fact, in this position, which also potentially fragments black's pawns, the move e4. An interesting kind of pawn sack. Now, and it potentially blocks the diagonal. Black actually played queen e8. If we have, say, f takes e4, what has happened? b6, rook c8, queen c4. This is going to be just good for white. Here, with the idea of c7 is crushing this position. b7, big advantage to white. So this move e4, very interesting. If, to show you this diagonal again, well, the king's been moved back to g2, and we can see a potential problem here, because black has this move, and then queen a8 pinning against the king with an even position, for example, like this. This will end up being an even position. White has to just do checks, potential checks. It's technically even there. So anyway, e4, interesting move. We have queen e8. E takes f5, so some fragmentation of black's pawns. This is now isolated and potentially an easier target. If king takes, then that would be end of game to checkmate. So g takes, king h2, queen a8, rook d5. We have queen f8, and now a6. The pawns are stepping forward, f4. Here, if queen a8, you might ask, then queen d2 looks at g5, among other things. For example, here, queen g5, rook d8. This is crushing. This is absolutely crushing. Well, it's a big advantage there. So, f4, g takes, king g6, check, f5. So Leela's making progress on the king side here now. Queen g3, king h7, queen g5, rook b8, f6, rook f7, and now rook d7, so wanting to exchange off a pair of rooks. The pass pawns are really amazing here. C takes, we have rook d8 in this position. b6, it's pretty much all over at this stage. Black played rook takes d7. If queen f7, then check, a7. This is just absolutely winning. These pawns crash through. But in this line, we have check, and then queen g4 picking up the rook on d7. So queen takes f6. It's just a matter of technique here, really. The game ended here, actually. Queen g6 adjudicated. It could continue. So white's winning this. King h3, check, and then check. Drag the pawns down eventually after getting a better position for the queen. Central, b7 just wins with queen a7 to follow. And this is an example continuation, triumphing with the passed pawns. So anyway, I'll take you back to the game end position. So this was a very, very interesting game choice, showing the power of connected passed pawns. It seems Leela is playing stuff which looks to us visually crushing and entertaining and justifies that and can control the tactics to really show the upsides of what feeds, our intuition. We really want things like connected pass pawns. So this is the sort of stuff Leela is going for in a very dynamic, aggressive way. Hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.